Tom Henshaw had been running John Deere iron since 1987. 3 decades, 30 harvest seasons. Every tractor on his 2,400-acre Nebraska wheat operation wore green paint. His neighbors knew it, the bank knew it, the dealer knew it, and Tom wore that loyalty like a badge. But on a cold March Saturday in 2019, at the Keller Estate auction outside McCook, something in him snapped. He wasn't there to start a revolution. He was there to pick up a backup planter, maybe a grain cart if the price was right. The Keller family had farmed for 60 years, and the equipment lineup reflected it. Deere, Case, a couple of old Internationals, standard Nebraska iron, then Lot 47 rolled out, a 2015 Massey Ferguson 8737, 4 years old, 370 horsepower, 6,000 hours, duals all around, pristine cab, the kind of tractor that still had new iron smell if you climbed inside. It had been a custom hire machine for the Keller boys. They'd kept it tight, serviced on schedule, stored inside. And it was red. Tom didn't care about red tractors. Never had. Massey Ferguson was something guys ran when they couldn't afford green, or when they were too stubborn to admit Deere made better machines. That's what Tom believed. That's what the dealer had told him for 30 years. And Tom had never questioned it. But then Jerry Milhouse opened his mouth. Jerry ran the Deere dealership in McCook. He was standing 20 feet from Tom when the auctioneer opened bidding at $60,000. Jerry didn't bid. He just smirked, turned to one of his lot guys and said, loud enough for half the crowd to hear, "Nobody's dumb enough to run red iron in wheat country." Tom's jaw tightened. The auctioneer called for 60. Silence. He dropped to 55. One hand went up. A custom operator from Kansas. The auctioneer nodded, called for 60. Nothing, dropped to 57. The Kansas guy raised again. Jerry laughed, not loud, just enough. Tom raised his hand, 60,000. The auctioneer's voice kicked up. The Kansas operator looked over, raised to 62. Tom countered at 65. The operator hesitated, raised to 67. Tom went 70. Jerry stopped smiling. The Kansas guy shook his head and stepped back. The auctioneer called it twice, raised his gavel, 70,000 going once, going twice, sold. Tom Henshaw just bought a Massey Ferguson. He didn't plan it, didn't budget for it, didn't even want it 10 minutes earlier. But Jerry Milhouse had smirked at the wrong man on the wrong day, and now Tom owned a 370 horsepower problem he'd have to explain to his wife, his accountant, and every Deere loyalist in Frontier County. The walk to the clerk's table felt longer than it should have. Tom signed the slip, handed over the deposit check. The clerk gave him the key and the service records. Tom folded them into his coat pocket and walked back to his truck without looking at Jerry. But he heard him. "Good luck with that." Tom didn't respond. He just started his truck and drove home with a titleless tractor he had no use for and a point to prove he didn't fully understand yet. His wife Linda was in the kitchen when he walked in. She looked up from her coffee. "How'd it go?" Tom set his keys on the counter. "Got the planter." "Good. What'd you pay?" $4,200. Linda nodded. "That's fair." Tom poured himself a cup, took a sip. Linda watched him. "What else?" Tom exhaled. "I bought a tractor." Linda's face didn't move. "We don't need a tractor." "I know. We have 4 tractors." "I know. All of them are Deere." "I know." "So what'd you buy?" Tom met her eyes. "Massey Ferguson, 8737, 70,000. Linda set her mug down slowly. She didn't yell. She never yelled. That's what made it worse. "Why?" It wasn't a question. It was an audit. Tom tried to explain. The deal, the condition, the hours, the price, how it was 47,000 under book value, how it was basically theft, how he couldn't pass it up. Linda listened. Then she said the thing Tom had been avoiding since he raised his hand. "You bought it because Jerry laughed." Tom didn't argue. Linda stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the machine shed where 4 green tractors sat in a row like a church choir. "You just spent $70,000 on pride." Tom wanted to say she was wrong, wanted to pull out the math, the book value, the resale potential. But Linda had been married to him for 32 years. She knew exactly what happened at that auction. He bought it to prove a point. Now he had to figure out what that point was. The Massey Ferguson sat in the shed for 2 weeks. Tom didn't touch it, didn't start it, just walked past it every morning on his way to the Deere lineup. It felt like a stranger at the dinner table. Big, red, out of place. His son Kyle noticed it first. When'd we go red? Tom shrugged. Auction deal. Kyle walked around it, climbed into the cab, sat in the seat, looked at the controls, climbed back down. You gonna run it? Maybe. For what? Don't know yet. Kyle nodded. Didn't push, but Tom saw the question in his face. The same question Linda asked. The same question Tom couldn't answer. Why? Spring work started the first week of April. Tom ran his usual setup, the 8370R on primary tillage, the 8295R on the field cultivator, the 8320R for planting. Everything ran smooth. Everything ran green, just like it had for 30 years. But every time Tom drove past the shed, he saw that Massey Ferguson sitting there, $70,000 of unused horsepower, a monument to a bad decision he couldn't undo. Then the 8295R threw a hydraulic line. It was a small leak, nothing catastrophic, but the part was on back order, 2 weeks minimum, maybe 3. And Tom had 400 acres of secondary tillage left before planting started. He could wait, push planting back, risk weather, risk moisture windows, or he could fire up the Massey Ferguson. Tom stood in the shed for 10 minutes, staring at that red tractor like it owed him an explanation. Then he climbed in, turned the key. The engine rolled over clean, smooth, no smoke, no hesitation, just 6 cylinders spinning up like they'd been waiting for this. Tom let it idle, checked the oil, checked the coolant, everything tight. He backed it out of the shed, hooked up the field cultivator, set the depth, dropped it in gear, and went to work. The first thing Tom noticed was the cab. It was quiet, quieter than his 8295R. The ACO Sisu engine had a deeper tone, less vibration. The seat suspension felt softer. The controls were laid out different, but not worse, just different. He ran the first pass, checked the depth, clean, even, no bouncing. The tractor pulled steady, no lugging, no hunting for RPM, just smooth, linear power. Tom ran another pass, then another. By the end of the first field, he stopped comparing it to the Deere. He just drove. 3 days later, he finished the tillage. The Massey Ferguson didn't miss a beat. No breakdowns, no error codes, no surprises. It just worked. Kyle was in the yard when Tom pulled in. How'd it run? Tom shut it down, climbed out, looked back at the tractor. Good. Kyle waited for more. Tom didn't give it. But that night at dinner, Linda asked the same question. You run the Massey? Yeah. And? Tom cut into his steak, chewed, swallowed. It's fine. Linda studied him. Fine like you're selling it, or fine like you're keeping it? Tom didn't answer right away, because the truth was starting to settle in, and the truth was uncomfortable. That Massey Ferguson didn't just run fine, it ran better. Planting season came fast. Tom ran his usual setup, the 8320R with the 32-row planter. It was his newest tractor, 5,500 hours, perfectly maintained. It had cost him $238,000 3 years ago. Financed over 5 years, he still owed $96,000 on it. But halfway through planting, the DEF system threw a code. It was a sensor issue, emissions related. The tractor still ran, but it limited power output to 60%. Tom could limp through, or he could take it to the dealer. Either way, he was losing time. He called Jerry Millhouse. How fast can you get a guy out here? What's the code? Tom read it off. Jerry sighed. That's an SCR fault. Gonna need a diagnostic, probably a sensor swap, maybe a module. I can get a guy out Monday. It's Wednesday. I know. Tom's grip tightened on the phone. I'm in the middle of planting. I understand, but we're slammed. Spring rush. You're not the only guy with a down tractor. What if I bring it in? You can try, but the bay's full till Friday. Tom hung up. He stood in the field, looked at the 8320R sitting there half functional, looked at the rows still left to plant, looked at the weather forecast, rain moving in Sunday. Then he looked at the Massey Ferguson. He drove it back to the yard, unhooked the field cultivator, hooked up the planter. It took him 20 minutes to adjust the hitch and calibrate the row sensors. The Massey had less fancy electronics than the Deere. No automated downforce, no individual row shutoff, just solid hydraulics and straightforward controls. Tom didn't care. He went back to the field and planted 400 acres in 2 days. No codes, no sensors, no DF faults, just red iron and black dirt. Word got around. In a county where everybody knew everybody's equipment lineup, a Deere guy running a Massey Ferguson was news. Not scandal, not betrayal, but news. Tom started getting calls. His neighbor Craig stopped by, asked about the tractor, asked how it ran, asked if Tom was switching brands. Tom said no, said it was just a backup, a deal too good to pass up. Craig nodded, but Tom saw the look. The same look Kyle had, the same look Linda had. They didn't believe him, because backup tractors don't get run harder than primaries. By June, the Massey Ferguson had logged 300 hours, more than any tractor on the farm. Tom told himself it was circumstantial. The Deere had issues. The Massey was available. That's all. But the truth was harder to ignore. Every time Tom climbed into that red cab, the math started running in his head. He paid $70,000 for the Massey Ferguson. It had 370 horsepower. That's $189 per horsepower. His 8320R cost $238,000. It had 320 horsepower. That's $744 per horsepower. The fuel burn was nearly identical. The maintenance was simpler. The dealer support was slower, but Tom was learning to wrench more himself. And the performance? Dead even. Tom didn't want to admit it, didn't want to say it out loud. But the conclusion was forming like a storm cloud he couldn't outrun. He'd been overpaying for 30 years. Harvest hit in July. Tom ran his usual combine, a Deere S780, bought new in 2017 for $495,000, financed over 7 years. He still owed $218,000 on it. The combine ran fine, but the grain cart tractor didn't. The 8370R started overheating, coolant leak, radiator crack. The dealer said it'd be a week to get the part. Tom couldn't wait a week, not in the middle of harvest. He hooked the grain cart to the Massey Ferguson. It pulled 30 tons like it was pulling air. The ATCO continuously variable transmission kept the engine in the sweet spot. No shifting, no jerking, just smooth, relentless pulling power. Tom ran it 16-hour days. The Massey didn't complain. By the end of harvest, it had logged 900 total hours since Tom bought it. The Deere lineup had logged 300 combined, and Tom couldn't lie to himself anymore. He wasn't running the Massey Ferguson because the Deeres were down. He was running it because it was better. September came. Tom sat in his office, stared at the spreadsheet he'd been avoiding all summer. Equipment costs, loan balances, depreciation, fuel, maintenance. The numbers were brutal. His 4 Deere tractors had a combined loan balance of $362,000, combined market value of $420,000, equity of $58,000. The Massey Ferguson was paid in cash, book value of $117,000, equity of $117,000. In other words, Tom had more equity in one impulse auction buy than in 30 years of Deere loyalty. He leaned back in his chair, rubbed his face. Linda walked in, set a glass of water on his desk. "You okay?" Tom didn't look up. "I've been doing this wrong." Linda sat down. "Doing what wrong?" "All of it. The tractors, the brand loyalty, the financing. I've been paying twice what I needed to for the same work." Linda didn't argue. She just waited. Tom pulled up another sheet, showed her the math. If he sold the Deere lineup and replaced it with equivalent Massey Ferguson iron, he'd cut his equipment debt by 60%. Same horsepower, same capacity, less money. "You thinking about switching?" Linda asked. Tom exhaled. "I don't know. Maybe." "What's stopping you?" Tom looked out the window, at the machine shed, at the green tractors lined up like soldiers. 30 years, Linda nodded. "That's a long time to be wrong." Tom met her eyes. "I don't know if I was wrong. I just know I can't afford to keep being right." October, Tom called Jerry Millhouse. "I want to talk trade." Jerry's voice perked up. "On what?" "The 8295R, the 8320R, maybe the 8370R. Silence. Then Jerry laughed. "You serious?" "Dead serious." "Tom, you've been running Deere since I've known you. What's this about?" Tom kept his voice level. "It's about economics. You want the trade or not?" Jerry shifted gears, went into dealer mode. "What are you looking at for replacements?" "Haven't decided yet. We've got some good used iron, clean 8R series, low hours. I'll let you know." Tom hung up. Then he called the Massey Ferguson dealer in North Platte. A guy named Ron picked up. "I'm looking at tractors," Tom said. "What do you need?" "Two 370-horse row crop, one 400-horse if you've got it." Ron didn't hesitate. "I can get you all 3, new or used. Used, clean, under 4,000 hours. Give me 2 days. I'll send you some options." Tom hung up. He sat there in the quiet, stared at the phone. 30 years of loyalty sitting on one side of the scale, economics sitting on the other. The scale wasn't even close. Ron called back Thursday. He had two 8735s, both under 3,000 hours, one 8740, 4,500 hours, all serviced, all field ready. Total package price, $390,000. Tom did the math. If he traded the three Deeres, he'd get $260,000 in trade credit. That left $130,000 to finance. At current rates, that was $2,600 a month over 5 years. His current payment on the Deere lineup was $6,200 a month. He'd cut his equipment payment in half. Same horsepower, same work capacity, half the cost. Tom told Ron he'd think about it, but he wasn't thinking anymore. He was deciding. Linda found him in the shed that night. He was standing next to the Massey Ferguson, just looking at it. "You gonna do it?" she asked. Tom nodded. "Yeah. You sure?" "No, but the math doesn't lie." Linda walked over, put her hand on the tractor's fender. "What are people gonna say?" Tom shrugged. "That I switched to red." "That's not what they'll say." "What will they say?" "That you admitted you were wrong." Tom thought about that. Thought about 30 years of defending green paint. 30 years of dealer loyalty. 30 years of financing decisions that felt right because everyone else was doing it. "Maybe I was," he said. Linda squeezed his arm. "Or maybe you just finally figured out what was right." Tom made the deal in November, traded the three Deeres, took delivery of the three Massey Fergusons, paid off the difference in cash, walked out of the dealership with 4 red tractors and a loan balance 62% lower than where he started. Jerry Milhouse didn't call, but Tom's neighbors did. Most of them were curious. A few were skeptical. One guy, an old-timer named Dutch, just laughed. "Took you long enough." "Long enough for what?" Tom asked. "To figure out green paint costs extra." Tom smiled. "Yeah, it does." Spring 2020. Tom ran his new lineup. The 8735s handled primary and secondary tillage. The 8740 pulled planting duty. Everything ran smooth. No codes, no DF faults, no back orders. And when something did break, Tom fixed it himself. The Massey Fergusons were simpler. Fewer sensors, fewer computers, more mechanical, more accessible. Tom could diagnose most issues in the field. Parts were cheaper. Lead times were shorter. By June, Tom had saved $14,000 in maintenance compared to the previous year. By August, he'd saved another $18,000 in financing costs. And by October, when he sat down with his accountant, the numbers told the whole story. Tom Henshaw had just completed his most profitable year in a decade, not because crop prices went up, not because yields improved, because he stopped paying for paint. December 2020. Tom was having coffee at the co-op when Jerry Milhouse walked in. They hadn't spoken since the trade. Jerry ordered his coffee, saw Tom, walked over. "How's the red iron treating you?" Tom looked up. "Good." Jerry nodded, hesitated, then said it. "I heard you had a hell of a year." Tom didn't gloat, didn't smile, just nodded. "We did all right." Jerry shifted his weight. "Look, I didn't mean what I said at that auction. About red iron. That was out of line." Tom set his coffee down. "You meant it, and you were wrong." Jerry's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue, because the proof wasn't in words anymore. It was in Tom's books, in his shed, in 4 red tractors that cost half what green ones did and worked just as hard. Jerry walked away without another word. Tom finished his coffee. 2 years later, Tom Henshaw runs Massey Ferguson Iron exclusively. He still sees Jerry Milhouse around town. They're not friends, but they're not enemies. They're just 2 guys who learned the same lesson at different costs. Tom doesn't regret the 30 years he spent running green. He just regrets how long it took him to ask why. His son Kyle runs the 8740 now, loves it, talks about buying his own Massey when he takes over the farm. Tom doesn't push it, but he doesn't discourage it either, because the best advice Tom can give his son isn't about brands, it's about math. And the math is simple. Horsepower is horsepower, torque is torque, work is work, everything else is just paint, and paint costs extra. Tom still drives past that McCook auction yard sometimes, still remembers the moment Jerry Milhouse smirked, still remembers raising his hand on a tractor he didn't need. It was the most expensive impulse buy of his life, and the best decision he ever made. Not because the Massey Ferguson was better, but because it forced him to ask the question he'd been avoiding for 30 years. What am I really paying for? The answer changed everything.